5-star general is handed the cure for his own disease, and it insults him so badly that he nearly turns around and goes home without it. Today's chapter is the one from which this week's study gets its name and its theme, and everyone in it is tested by the exact same thing: whether they'll trust something too small to look like it's working by the power of God.
Seven times in the Jordan, watch me believe. I go down broken, I come up clean. Open my eyes to the hills, angels all around. Horses of fire, where fear back down. There is a prophet in Israel calling, you'll see. Call on him, call on him.
Welcome to Come Listen With Me. My name is Ricky Black, aka Elder Eleazar, and today is our Thursday, July 9th reading of 2 Kings chapter 5. It's part of our ongoing 2026 Come Follow Me study of the Old Testament. Before we begin, let's just take a moment to acknowledge our Father in heaven and his Son, Jesus Christ, whom he sent, and give appreciation and thanks for instructions too small to brag about. Nobody in this chapter is asked to do something impressive. A girl says one sentence. A man washes in a river he could have named 3 better ones for. And most of what's actually asked of us looks exactly like that. Unimpressive from the outside. And most of us have to decide, the same as Naaman, whether we'll do it anyway. So with that, let's open our scriptures to 2 Kings chapter 5. Now, this chapter, the whole week, again, this is where it gets its theme from. We're going to see the name of the song, the name of the theme for the week. And it runs one test on 5 different people back to back. Will you trust something that doesn't look like it should actually work? So watch who passes, who fails, and who nearly fails until somebody talks some sense into them. All right, so the first. So Naaman has everything a man can reasonably want, except good health. Now, the scriptures stacks up his resume before it mentions the leprosy, and it does this on purpose. He's the captain or general of Syria's army, honored by his king, credited with an actual national victory. And then quietly, the one thing that none of that can fix. Now, it's worth being precise about what leprosy means here, because the English word, honestly, it kind of oversells it. See, the Hebrew is sara'ath, and it was never Hansen's disease, right? And Hansen's disease is the disfiguring progressive infection that English readers typically tend to picture when we think of leprosy. Now, that specific medical link, it didn't actually exist until medieval Arabic physicians merged true leprosy with the older, vaguer term centuries after these books were actually written. Now, the merged sense is what eventually wrote into the English translation and why we picture it that way. But Sara'ath in the Hebrew, it covers a range of different skin conditions. And Leviticus even applies the same word to mold on a wall. So that matters for how you end up reading this chapter. See, a man with Hansen's disease doesn't stay a functioning, national general commanding the army of an entire nation, right? So whatever Naaman has is serious enough to want it gone, but it's not serious enough to have ended his career yet. So he isn't a desperate man who's out of options. He has a little room to be picky about how he's healed, which is exactly what makes the test coming a very real test and not just a last resort. See, the person who solves it has none of what he has. See, a servant girl taken captive in a border raid, waiting on his wife. So she's a slave, no freedom, no standing, and by any reasonable count, no motive to help the enemy commander who owns her. If anything, it might be the exact opposite. So we're going to pick that up here and start reading about it in, let me see here, chapter 5, verses 2 through 4. And the Syrian had gone out by companies and had brought away captive out of the land of Israel a little maid, and she waited on Naaman's wife. And she said unto her mistress, Would God my Lord were with the prophet that is in Samaria, for he would recover him of his leprosy. And one went in and told his Lord, saying, Thus and thus said the maid that is of the land of Israel. So she isn't rewarded for this in the text at all, right? She isn't even named, right? Her one sentence simply happens to be true. And it starts moving up the chain of communication here. Girl to mistress, mistress to Naaman, Naaman to his own king. And it's carried entirely by people who have to decide whether to trust a source with zero credentials, or actually with potential intent to do harm. So just hold on to that question about the validity that they're dealing with here for just a moment, right? Because everyone left in this chapter is going to face some version of that same sort of question. Now, the first person to fail that test should be the least likely candidate, right? The king of Israel, a man who actually has a prophet working in his own kingdom. And the letter itself is, worth a bit to pause and reflect on. See, Syria's king is never named in this chapter. But if the conventional dating holds, he's very likely the same king Assyrian records call Hadadezer, right? Or Ben-Hadad in King's own vocabulary, who around this same period stood shoulder to shoulder with Ahab of Israel against the Assyrian army at the Battle of Karkar. Now, Israel and Damascus, they were enemies in one decade, uneasy battle allies in another, and then enemies again after that. Like, it was just kind of this back and forth tentative, peacetime, back to warring. So Naaman's letter isn't crossing some fixed ancient hostility. It's crossing a relationship that kept changing shape every few years. So there's potential trust issues there. And it makes the king of Israel's instinct to assume the worst very understandable, like even while it's still wrong. So let's read here in verses 7 and 8. And it came to pass when the king of Israel had read the letter, and he rent his clothes and said, Am I God to kill and to make alive, that this man doth send unto me to recover a man of his leprosy? Wherefore consider, I pray you, and see how he seeketh a quarrel against me. And it was so, when Elisha the man of God had heard that the king of Israel had rent his clothes, that he sent to the king, saying, Wherefore hast thou rent thy clothes? Let him come now to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Syria's letter arrives, sounding kind of like a threat. Cure this man. No room for failure. King to king. And Jehoram doesn't think of Elisha for even a single moment here. And he tears his robe and he assumes this is an ambush, right? So the one person in this chapter with the least excuse to misread the situation is the one who actually misreads it the worst. Elisha's answer is almost bored by comparison. Yeah, send him to me. And buried in a one-line reply to somebody else's panic is the sentence that the entire week gets its name for, our theme, right? So it's not some big sermon or a massive correction. It's just tossed off to a man who should have already known better. There is a prophet in Israel. Now, Naaman arrives expecting the same kind of drama the king just failed to provide. And he gets something worse from his perspective. See, it's not too hard. In fact, it's insultingly easy. Pick that up here in verses 11 and 12. But Naaman was wroth and went away and said, Behold, I thought he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of his Lord, his God, and strike his hand over the place and recover the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar, rivers of Damascus, better than all the river waters of Israel? May I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in a rage. So notice what exactly offends him. It's not the difficulty of it. It's actually the simplicity and the plainness, right? He wanted a performance. The prophet stepping out and hand waving over the wound, calling down the power and authority of God, his name invoked out loud, something that looks like it cost God some effort. What he gets is a servant relaying 7 words through a closed door. Basically to go and wash in the River Jordan. Now, Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, they are cleaner, they're more famous than anything Israel has to offer in those days. And he says that's why he calls them out by name, right? He came all this way to fail the exact test that the servant girl passed without even trying. So trusting something with no credentials attached, only this time the thing with no credentials, it's kind of the instruction itself. So once again, it isn't the powerful man who sees clearly. It's the people underneath him. Let's continue on here in verses 13 and 14. And his servants came near and spake unto him and said, My father, if the prophet had bid thee do some great thing, wouldst thou have not have done it? How much rather than when he saith to thee, Wash and be clean? Then went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God, and his flesh came again like unto flesh of a little child, and he was clean. So his own servant makes the argument for him, and it's a good one, right? If the prophet had asked you something enormous, difficult, right, you'd have done it without blinking. So why does this small ask disqualify it? And he can't argue with it. So he does. He goes down and he dips 7 times in the Jordan. And the detail that the text chooses is very precise here. His flesh comes back like the flesh of a little child. Now, Naaman, this decorated general, right, honored might and valor, he ends the scene with skin of the least powerful person he could be compared to. And he's healed in the same social position that the servant girl started in, basically a young child. Now, every low-status voice in this chapter has been right. And the servant girl, the servants at the chariot, all of them saw clearly with nothing to gain from it. In the chapter's last scene asks whether that also runs backwards, whether standing closest to the miracle is enough on its own to understand what you just watched. Now, Elisha won't take payment. As the Lord liveth, before whom I stand, I will receive none. And he's keeping the whole transaction as free as the girl's sentence that started it. Now, what Naaman asked for instead tells you exactly how far his conversion has traveled and exactly how far it hasn't. See, first, 2 mule loads of Israelite dirt. It sounds strange until you know the assumption sitting underneath it. See, the common ancient belief that a god's power was tied to his territory. Not that his power was universal, right? That same logic behind Balak dragging Balaam from mountaintop to mountaintop back in Numbers. He's hoping a change of geography would change what came out of his mouth. Well, Naaman wants to build his altar on the actual ground belonging to the Lord, Jehovah, so that even standing in Damascus, he's still technically on the correct real estate. Now, it's a small homemade solution to a theology he's only sort of half worked out at this point, but it's an interesting sort of note about how the ancients perceive these things. See, because the man who just passed the test of trusting something small now wants something small to carry his faith home in. Now, second, a confession that sounds like an excuse and mostly isn't. See, his job requires him to stand beside his king in the temple of Rimmon, right? Hadad, the Aramean storm god. The same god folded into the name of practically every Syrian king in this book. And he has to physically support him while he bows. Now, Naaman isn't asking permission to keep worshiping Rimmon. He's asking forgiveness in advance for a posture that his career won't let him avoid, like a technical service that he's required to carry out in the performance of his duties. Now, Elisha's answer is very simple. Go in peace. So there's no lecture or conditions attached. The man who couldn't trust a small instruction an hour ago is now the one trusting an sort of incomplete theology that he needs to work out for himself, right? Now, Gehazi has watched this entire story from the inside. He was there for the letter, the instructions, and the healing, and it's Gehazi, not a stranger or an outsider, Elisha's own attendant, who runs after Naaman with a lie and comes back with silver. See that in verses 26 through 27. And he said unto him, Went not mine heart with thee, when the man turned again from his chariot to meet thee? Is it a time to receive money, and to receive garments, and olive yards, and vineyards, and sheep, and oxen, and menservants, and maidservants? The leprosy therefore of Naaman shall cleave unto thee, and unto thy seed forever. And he went out from his presence a leper, as white as snow. Went not my heart to meet thee, or with thee? So Elisha asks, I was there even when you thought I wasn't. Gehazi had every advantage that the servant girl never had. Proximity, standing, a front row seat to every miracle, every sentence uttered by the prophet. And he's the one who fails the test that the young captive girl passed. The leprosy that just left Naaman's body finds a new address on Gehazi. So nearness to the miracle, it turns out, was never anything that's going to guarantee anything. It's not a qualification in of itself. Trusting in the Lord and his prophet was. Anyway, that's all of our reading for today. But down in the comments, though, I'd like to get your thoughts. See, 5 people get tested this chapter. The young servant girl, the king, Naaman, Naaman's servants, and Gehazi. And the only ones with nothing to gain are the ones who passed it cleanly. So what does that pattern tell you about where this book expects reliable testimony to come from? Now, tomorrow, the same question gets asked for an entire household, and it very rarely gets someone killed before it's finally answered. Looking forward to covering all that. And before we go, though, don't forget the week's Substack double portion. It actually spends its longest stretch right here in today's chapter, right? So it's Naaman's confession is the article's turning point. So if today grabbed you, that's the next thing to read if you haven't read it yet already. So go check it out. And again, tomorrow, 2 Kings chapter 6. It's about a borrowed axe head, a servant who can't see what's actually surrounding him, and a siege that turns dark very, very fast. And also the song of the week, there is a prophet in Israel. Its chorus is built on today's 7 dips in the Jordan. So it's finally, showing up here with what we've been listening about and learning about all week. Again, it's built to help with your study, to go along and help retain everything in a fun and entertaining way. So if you haven't downloaded or listened to it yet, check it out. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. I'll see you back here tomorrow. And until then, as always, I appreciate you all and thank you for choosing to spend some of your precious time to come listen with me.
Down broken, I come up clean. Open my eyes to the hills, angels all around. Horses of fire, where fear back down. There is a prophet in Israel. Call and you'll see it. Call on him, call on him. There is a prophet in Israel. Call on him, fall on him. Call on him, call on him. Call on him. And watch the river part.